Hey, 7th graders, Mr. Aller here again with another one of your flip lessons. Today we're going to be talking about Thomas Jefferson's presidency. This is going to be on page 85 of your interactive notebook. I believe it's going to be the same window pane kind of graphic organizer that we used for our Adams presidency and for our Washington presidency. You're going to fill in the blanks as you go with your notes. Should be relatively easy peasy. Without further ado, let's get into this. Alright, so election of 1800, I kind of left the pictures out just because I felt like it would be easier to talk about it and then kind of talk about it again through the pictures. So if you need to pause and get your notes, you can pause and get your notes, that's fine. It also helps me a lot with figuring out where to put the question. But anyways, let's get off on a tangent. So the election of 1800 is going to set two precedents for presidential elections, or two traditions that are going to be happening pretty frequently in our presidential elections, okay? Number one, the press is going to be heavily involved. And this is kind of John Adams' own doing, right, with the Alien and Sedition Acts. He made it illegal to say anything bad about the government. So the press is going to be very, very involved to try to get rid of him. And that's going to lead to his unpopularity. Particularly, there's going to be newspapers that start to come out that are particularly biased. There's going to be Federalist newspapers. There's going to be Democratic newspapers, etc. That are trying to point voters in one direction or the other. Also, this is going to be the first transition of political power. All right, there's nothing in the Constitution that said, this is what happens if a president tries for re-election and they lose. So people didn't know what to expect. Was John Adams going to kind of fight it? Was he going to kind of, was this going to lead to a civil war? Because as you'll see from the map, there was definitely some sectional differences in who voted for who, but nothing was kind of set up for that. I mean, John Adams was kind of sour grapes about losing and kind of left in the middle of the night, but he wasn't really, he wasn't mean about it, or he wasn't like violent about it, I guess I should say. The other odd thing about the election is it's going to change the election. Really, this should have been kind of a third precedent. I kind of probably should have put the notes in a little bit differently. But Jefferson won the election, but they did it in a very odd way. In many states, people thought they were voting for Jefferson, and people thought they were voting for Aaron Burr, who was the other Democratic Republican nominee, and they didn't really split the vote at all. It kind of just counted for both of them. So they didn't have any way to say who was president and who was vice president. So in actuality, Jefferson and Burr tied. Now they did put this in the Constitution, and they did make sure that that there was a stipulation. So whenever there's a tie, the vote goes to the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, they had a vote, and Jefferson wound up winning that vote. It took a couple of votes to get there. We kept getting a tie, but eventually, Thomas Jefferson was picked by the House of Representatives. And here we can kind of see a little chart of this. You can see how they kind of split up the vote. Aaron Burr from New York and Thomas Jefferson from Virginia got the same number of electoral votes, so they had to figure out kind of how to do this. So they had the vote for the House, and eventually in the vote for the House, Thomas Jefferson won, and you can kind of see those numbers that there wasn't a lot of votes. The other kind of crazy thing about this too is look at the people who lost could still be voted on. So Adams and Charles Pinckney, who are Federalists, John Jay, they could still get votes in the House of Representatives, which I think is pretty crazy. But anyway, you can kind of see how the breakdown of those votes happened. All right, so big part of Jefferson's presidency is going to be the Louisiana Purchase, and it's kind of ironic in a way, right? Jefferson's a Democratic Republican. He wants a small government, particularly at the national level, and state governments. And in actuality, the national government, when he leaves, is far stronger than when he left. So basically, what happens is Jefferson sends some delegates over to France, and really what he's interested in is he's interested in buying the city of New Orleans. New Orleans is at the mouth of the Mississippi River, and he's very worried that France will cut that city off for American trade, which will hurt American farmers. So he sends some delegates to France, offers them the city, says, "Here's $5 million for the city. Um, what can we do?" And France makes a counteroffer that's kind of ridiculous. They say, "Oh, you want $5 million for the city? How about 15 million for the whole thing?" It's kind of like going to a garage sale and being like, "You know what? That's a nice bike over there. I'll give you $10 for that bike." And they say, "Hey, how about, $30 and I'll give you my car?" Or whatever you want to do to kind of think of a drastic. This is a bargain price. It comes out to about $300 million in today's money, about 3 cents an acre. With this, the United States is going to gain control of some pretty important geographical locations. Number one, for trade, Mississippi River for trade and travel is going to be a big deal. To this day, it's still used as both travel and trade, and it was really America's first highway during this time period. The city of New Orleans for about the next 30 years or so is going to be the most important trade city in America until New York City kind of eclipses it with the building of the Erie Canal. But until then, it's going to be kind of all American goods are going to make their way through the city of New Orleans in some way, shape, or form. And it's also going to double the size of the country. We were still kind of everything east of the Mississippi River to the Atlantic Ocean, and we're literally going to double the size of the country overnight. The crazy thing about this is Jefferson wasn't sure he could do this. There was really nothing in the Constitution about acquiring land. There was nothing in the Constitution that said, this is what you do if you want to purchase something from another country. And the Federalists jumped all over him on this, saying, "Oh, you wanted to be this small government guy, and you're creating more government powers. This isn't very much like you." And they were pretty much against the Louisiana Purchase at the start. It does kind of go with, his whole, we're going to support the farmers because you're gaining a ton of available farmland. Jefferson defends his choice of using this by saying it's within his realm of the ability to create treaties. So you just bought this whole piece of land, and quite frankly, they didn't know what was there. It's kind of like buying a house, but not really looking at the house at all, just kind of knowing, hey, down the street somewhere, there's a really big house and it's cheap. So you buy it, and then you're like, oh, we got to figure out what we got. So Jefferson, again, and this is another kind of secretive deal, goes into Congress and kind of says, hey, I want to pay to send these two guys to kind of figure out what we got. And he sends Lewis and Clark out. Federalists raise a hubbub again, talk about this being a crazy military excursion, of like 8 guys going. But the real important part with Lewis and Clark is they're going to be aided by this woman named Sacagawea. She was very influential. Pretty much every historian is going to suggest if Sacagawea was not with them on this journey, Lewis and Clark may have lasted a week in hostile Native American territory. She knew the traditions. She knew a variety of languages. She knew what food to eat, what food not to eat, when it was time to travel, when it was not time to travel, what weather patterns might be coming, things like that, that just was indispensable for Lewis and Clark. Their trek covers 8,000 miles from what is now St. Louis, Missouri, all the way to the Pacific coast. It lasts 2 years, and there's no way of telling Jefferson, hey, let's send him a postcard from Montana. Montana doesn't exist yet. There's no mail carriers. One of the key points with this, though, and we'll kind of talk about we'll wait for that one. We'll look at the map. All right, so here kind of we get into where you can kind of see where one of the big things about Lewis and Clark's travel, you can see they kind of follow the Missouri River, pretty smart. And then if you notice something at the end there, they kind of trespass and they go through hundreds of miles of kind of unclaimed territory. Kind of gives you the idea that in 1804, the United States is really thinking of expanding all the way to the Pacific Ocean. They know it's there. Spanish traders and things like that have told them about it. They have a good idea of the size of the country. On the way back, Clark and Lewis kind of split up to kind of travel more land. They keep very intricate journals. They're very, very good artists. They bring back a lot of specimens of animals and plants and things like that. That is really going to kind of change the way America thinks about territory and gaining land and stuff like that. Okay, foreign issues is kind of what does Jefferson in, and it kind of makes him feel like it pretty much ruins his second term of office. He has a lot of success in his first term, particularly with the Louisiana Purchase. Things are going good. But war in Europe kind of has its ugly head again as Britain and France are again at war. Side note, if you know anything about European history, there was this guy named Napoleon in France. He was particularly obnoxious with trying to take over the world, and so Britain and France were constantly at war during this time period. Also, why they were able to buy the Louisiana Purchase is Napoleon needed some money for his war. But anyway, they're at war, and they both think that America should be their ally. Again, same thing that happened with Washington, same thing that happened with Adams. You know, Britain, we're more culturally connected with Great Britain, speak the same language, same cultural traditions, etc. And you know, we got that all that help from the American Revolution. Jefferson feels the United States could trade with both countries. Both countries see that as an act of war. You know, your enemy of the friend of my enemy is also my enemy type of thing. Britain is upset that America is trading with France. France is upset that we're trading with Britain, and we're kind of stuck in the middle. And kind of, I don't want to use this word, but it does seem very stupid of an idea. If you've ever heard that term, you know, cut your nose off to spite your face. That's what Jefferson does here. Because Jefferson says basically, you know what, you guys are mad at me, you guys are mad at me, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. I'm passing the Embargo Act of 1807. I'm going to ban trade not with France, not with Britain, with everybody. There's going to be no foreign trade from Americans. And his idea is that's going to keep us out of this war. But what it does is it tanks the American economy, and it's going to make Jefferson hugely unpopular. As a matter of fact, we're going to look at a little chart here to end our discussion on this here for a little bit. Click over. All right, you can see by the chart, you know, foreign trade and value of exports. You know, exports are stuff we're sending to our country. Imports we're bringing in. And you can kind of see from 1800 to kind of 1808, we got a pretty good trade going with other countries. But you can kind of see when the Embargo Act of 1807 hits, trade plummets. Not only the value of imports, which is what we were kind of hoping we were going to hurt Britain and France by not trading with them, but Britain and France then says, you know what, if you're not going to trade our stuff, guess what, we're not going to take your stuff. And that's where it hurts American traders, particularly those Federalists up in New England, who just kind of hate Jefferson for this. All right, that's our flip lesson for tonight. I know this video is a little bit longer, but Jefferson kind of packed a lot of info in his 4 years, some really important things that are going to impact us from here on out, including the acquisition of territory, dealing with foreign relations, etc. If you have any questions, as always, hit me up on Schoology. You can send me a direct message if it's anything particular to you, grade-wise, etc. If it's anything particular to the lesson, just post something on the wall. Either myself or one of your classmates will get back to you. Till then, 7th graders, see ya. Allard out.